Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the plight of minorities in India. We've seen statements coming from authors like Noam Chomsky, where he talks about extremism having taken a most lethal form in India. There's also 250 million Indian Muslims who are personally being persecuted at this time. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the fact that, of course, as far as the world is concerned, we haven't seen the kind of reaction that needs to be there from the world community at large, from the powers that be. As far as the plight of these minorities are concerned, we recently saw what happened as far as the hijab ban is concerned. We saw students protesting all over India. Their own Indian authors themselves, in publications all over the world. The issue certainly seems to be right in the face, but unfortunately there doesn't seem to be the kind of response one needs at this time for there to be that kind of interest in issues of interests as far as minorities are concerned, as far as persecution of minorities are concerned, as far as brutalities are concerned. Of course, Kashmir has been an issue, but now it seems minorities across the board in India are coming under attack and taking its most lethal form. We'll be talking about all of that today. I have with me Javed Rana, who's a senior journalist. Thank you for being with us today. Altaf Hussain, who's a Kashmiri leader. Thank you for joining us. We also have with us Dr. Jameel Khan, who's a former ambassador. Thank you for joining us today. Javed Sahab, like I said, it seems like authors all over the world, we've seen, professors, we've seen intelligentsia talk about this issue now and again. The way that there is persecution of minorities in India, it's increased over time. Yesterday we talked about it, about the fact that, of course, it seems to be a religious card for this government. We saw that, this is the second term as far as Modi is concerned, and it seems like it may suit them politically, or it may have suited them at a time politically to divide into India into this kind of minorities being Hindutva movement that has started, and Hindu and Muslim. But now, do you think that things have escalated to a level where we may see some kind of reaction from the world? Of course, it is being talked about, like I said.
I think let's forget about the world reactions, because that would not happen. This is India, and this is a case of Muslims. So the world has never been had any concern about the Muslims, other than for the political consumption. I think the kind of the lethal form of extremism, and I insist to use the word of lethal form of extremism, and the kind of the persecution that we have begun to witness in India, that is unprecedented in the mankind history, except for Nazi Germany and what happened with the Muslims in Spain. Because the Muslims were given options in Spain. Either you have to convert back to the Christianity or get ready to be killed. And exactly that was a formula that has been adopted by the BJP. And in 2014, 2015, when the president, first time Modi came into power, and then they had the agenda that by 21 they would be able to convert back all Muslims into what they call the regional religion in Hinduism. That has not happened. Obviously, there has been resistance from the Muslims. There has been less resistance from the Christians, but certainly their number is more who have been forced to convert it back. They are claiming about the Muslims, but their number is very insignificant. Now,
so forced conversions that you're talking about, it's not.
They call it a Ghar Wapsi program, which means returning to their original religion, and it's on an ideological perspective. And now they have set the deadline of 2026. So we've got maybe 4 years. And then they have recruited 6 million people who are the volunteers who will force people to do that. And BJP is following multiple tools, legislative tools, where the Muslims, they've been told that they cannot convert any Hindu even by voluntarily. That is the very crux of the legislation. And then the underlying message is that the India is willing to give citizenship to anyone except for Muslims. And when BJP leaders themselves are saying that the Muslims are not equal citizens, we are talking about a country which claims to be a secular.
Right, exactly. That's what I want to come to. I'll come back to you, Altasaf. That's what I want to talk about. The fact that, we have seen the fact that the way the India parades itself in the world as a secular state, as a state which grants freedoms to its minorities across the board, the way that they are looked at in terms of their art, in terms of their culture, in terms of their overall makeup, when we talk about tourism, all of those things. What is happening in India at this time? Do you think that it's actually going to make a difference to that kind of, mirage that they want to paint for the world? That's what I want to know.
You see, we have seen already that it's not going to happen. Actually, till 2014, we could see all over the world the advertisements, incredible India, shining India and all that. Yeah. Now you will see intolerant India all over the world.
So it is going to be. So it is going to become.
It is an intolerant India now. Yeah. And it has been documented, it has been talked about, and there are lots of reports on it. I'll come back, rather go back to history. Where India took always a refuge, that was the Constitution of India, that in Constitution of India guarantees all the rights to the minorities and all its citizens. But the father of the Constitution, who himself in 1954 in the parliament said, if I am allowed, I will burn down this constitution because this constitution has failed to give the rights to the minorities. He was himself a Dalit, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. So from that onwards, we have seen that always minorities were at the receiving end, but it was not in public and it was not state condoned. Though the state mechanism was there, put in order to curtail the freedoms of the minorities, but state directly was not responsible for it. But after 2014, what we see, as Rana Sahib was telling us, that on one hand, they used the legislative powers in order to make certain amendments in the constitution in order to identify the Muslims and then put them their citizenship rights at risk and all that.
It's planned, premeditated. Persecution.
And then we see the profiling of Muslims all over the India, and that's why when the Article 370 and 35A was revoked in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, at that time Genocide Watch issued a genocide alert at that time. And recently, before this congressional hearing, which we are talking about, where Noam Chomsky said that in the lethal form of persecution on minorities is coming from India, before this congressional hearing, the founder of the Genocide Watch, he also said that impending genocide in India, now it has crossed the 9 points and there is only one step left for the genocide in India for Muslims and in India and also in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We have seen that it is in a way the Indian current regime, the current government, it is run by, as Rana said, they have recruited, how many people they have recruited for this from the RSS goons and all that who will do it on ground. But state, at the end of the day, the state is supporting them. We have seen in Delhi's riots, which happened last year when 53 people were killed in those riots, 40 of them were Muslims, and none of the perpetrators was persecuted. If anybody was sent to jail, if anybody was persecuted, those were the Muslims, they had the hate speech. But what we have seen...
let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Dr. Jameel Khan. Jameel Saab, overall, as far as I think one of the things that's interesting about this, or I think maybe interesting is a wrong word, reprehensible and the extreme, is that this is not only state condoned, but this is also premeditated persecution, and a premeditated persecution of minorities, not only just Muslims, as far as at the hands of this government at this time. Would you agree with that? And also the reaction of the world is missing at this time. If not missing, then certainly there needs to be a stronger voice all over, drawing attention to what's happening there at this time.
That's correct, Jennifer. I totally agree with you. And not only that, the world is not reacting the way they should have reacted on such a violation, on such a huge and such a serious violation of the human right, and it is breaking all the international laws, and not only international laws, but the recent commission report, the Religious Commission report of the United States, has clearly articulated so many points, but what we are discussing over here about the religious freedom in India. So, and then the Universal Charter, United Nations Universal Charter by itself, Article 2, is very clear about the religious freedom. Finally, what can we expect from a regime which is run on the basis of religio-ethnocracy? Now, if they are following this mechanism of religio-ethnocracy, and that automatically harms all other components in it, such as Hinduism mindset, such as RSS-driven BJP, such as the orchestrated plan and program of marginalizing the Muslims. And you already heard about the prediction of genocide. The same gentleman had predicted genocide of Rwanda, and it happened there. So 9 stages, 9 points have already achieved. The 10th one is just knocking the door. And now your question that why the world is not reacting, the geopolitical situation of the world, the interest of the big powers of the world, the alliances of big part of the world, they have their own axe to grind. We have to really bear in mind the way things are developing.
I'll come back to you. Ali Raza Saab, like the former ambassador is saying, you know, Jameen Saab is talking about the fact that it has to do with geopolitical interests, which are of course at the center of all international relations. But at what point do you think humanitarian considerations or considerations that, you know, the potential for this to turn into a Nazi Germany-like situation, you know, what happened in Spain, which is what Javed Saab here talked about, will override those considerations, or do you think that it will ever override those considerations?
Thank you for having me. I think there is some words from the historians about the German Nazis when Hitler came to power in 1930s. The historian have a word for Germans. You know, in the situation like now in Asia, what is developing under Modi regime, it is, I think these words are very important. That Germans who joined the Nazi party, not because they hated Jews, but out of a hope of restored patriotism or a sense of economic annexity or a hope to preserve their religious values, dislike of their opponent or raw political opportunism or convenience or ignorance or greed. That word is Nazi. I think nowadays, if you see the path of Modi regime is exactly the same path they are moving where the Hitler moved in 1930s, and then the Europe have seen the destruction of Europe. And I am afraid that if today the international community and especially the Western powers who suffered, the European Union, the most of the Europe have suffered under Nazi occupation or Nazi war. So it is the time that everybody
West that refuses to react now to what's happening at this time. You know, of course, you and I can see it. We've seen different voices raised from time to time. You know, different, the intelligentsia all over the world, authors, you know, even publications all over the world talk about what's happening in India at this time. You know, they talk of the talk about the image of a secular state, which India keeps talking about, trying to harness, trying to you know, send out into the world. That certainly has taken a dent. But when, you know, you're saying the way where things are headed, and you know, the potential crisis that this can result into, you know, even the hijab issue we've recently witnessed, as far as India is concerned, the protests that protests that have erupted all over India in that regard also. So in that kind of a scenario, when the world has seen how much it can suffer as a whole, the ramifications of what happened in Nazi Germany, the world is still reeling from that. Do you think that there will be a reaction again?
I think there will be a reaction, but I hope that it will not be too late. As the Human Rights Genocide Watch president has said, he warned before Rwanda's genocide, and he warned again now what is going to happen in India. So I hope that the international community will realize and act now. There is no time left. It is the time to act. But the problem is that the world is busy with the COVID-19, and now there is Ukrainian crisis, and the West is busy with Russia there. So, but the civil society and the political leadership in Western world also, I think they are starting to realize that what is.
I'll just come back to you. I'm going to go to Javed Sahab. Javed Sahab, overall, as far as what Ali Sahab is saying, there's no denying any of that. But in terms of as far as the world being busy with all these other crises are concerned, I'm not going to be cynical enough to say this, but it seems that there is going to be some crisis all over the world at some point. The world is going to be dealing with a lot of issues, but this is certainly one of those issues that is now coming up. It's certainly important. Leaving the geo-economics of it, the geo-strategic position, as far as the geo-interests all over the world, whether they align with India, their whole importance as an economy, their whole importance as a potential market for the West, all of those things. What honestly, you think that there will be a reaction? Because we haven't seen Kashmir. Look at Kashmir. I want to go to Altaf Sahab on that also. But the persecution there has been going on for a long time. Now, of course, it is spilling into India in a way, and it is now spilling into other minorities apart from Muslims also. But it's been there.
I think we should not live in fool's paradise. We should not expect the world would come into help Kashmiris or Muslims in India. I think over the course of last 77 decades, we have seen that the world never came to rescue Kashmiris. They've been persecuted. Over 150,000 people have died. More than 10,000 people have got disappeared. And women were raped at a large scale. What happened? The world reaction would not be there. Let's be clear about it. So there would be reaction, certainly. The reaction, to begin with, would come from the Muslim communities within India. I think people would turn into militancy.
Okay.
I fear they would carry out suicide bombing. Okay. The militant groups like Al-Qaeda and other regional groups would come into play, and they would start retaliating. And that means that there would be wider conflict. Okay. And then when people would migrate into the neighboring countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh, because they did now, let's be clear, it's not just Indian Muslim they want to convert them back. There are also, they have set their sight on Pakistan, Afghanistan, Indonesia, Bangladesh. And they are claiming that we are going to convert them back to the Hindu religion.
You talk about wider conflict, let me come back.
But again, this is a very extremely important point. Wider conflict means this is a nuclearized region.
Okay.
Pakistan, India are a nuclear state. And
yes,
that
the
would
potential
be that,
for this to blow over, for this to escalate,
for disaster.
There is a huge threat here. And Altaf Sahab, of course the potential, because both Pakistan and India are both nuclear states, and of course we've had the whole deterrence effect and all of those things going on, but the potential threat of it, like I said, is quite clearly there. And we've seen the reaction that has come from Indian side when there is the responses that motivated comments on our internal issues are not welcome, which is what they've said to the international media reporting. So for India to take that kind of stance, that means that they're quite belligerent. They're quite, they're not going to accept the fact what's happening, and they're not going to respond to this in a nice way, because we've seen how they've responded now.
See, we have seen that the Indian leadership have never responded positively to any of the critiques or any of the suggestions which have been put forth by the international opinion makers, writers, or that for the civil society actors over the last few decades. What we have seen always, what I already said, they always took refuge in their constitution. We have all internal mechanisms to set it aside. But let me tell you what India did. They started Kashmir as a laboratory, testing laboratory. Whatever they did, whatever they are doing in India now with the minorities in India, with Muslims, with Christians and other minorities in India, they started in Kashmir. Unfortunately, at that time, Indian minorities and others, they remained silent at that time. They just witnessed it, what is happening in Kashmir. What they did in Kashmir, first of all, catch and kill operations, siege and search operation, killing youth, maiming them, blinding them, and all that. I'm not going to count the figures of that. But soon after they abrogated Article 370 and 35A in the occupied Kashmir, that was to disempower the Muslim majority of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, to disseminate their identity, to disempower them. And similarly, after that, when there was not such a reaction from the Indians,
so basically,
then we saw the same thing happening in
to
India.
now across the board.
CA was introduced there. So what we see in future, India is a big country in the region. When there will be a conflict among the groups in India, as the Indian government is pursuing the majoritarian religions, and that other religions will always they will defend themselves, they will see, and then we will have the effect to the neighbors, and this conflict will escalate. Already this Hindutva mindset has crossed the boundaries. It has reached to the West also. West should not remain in fool's paradise, that they are not going to be, as they were telling us in past, when we were telling them about the sovereignization of India, they said that's a localized issue. Islamophobia is a huge issue.
And it's not anymore. Issue. You're saying, okay,
now,
right, let me come back to Altaf Saab. Dr. Jameel, I think what Altaf Saab is saying is very true. He's talking about the fact that, India thought in the beginning that this is a contained issue, that they could contain it as far as Kashmir is concerned. Also that Kashmir itself was a testing ground, and the world didn't respond to it the way that they should have. There was not the kind of condemnation, the kind of reaction that should have been seen from across the board as far as Kashmir was concerned, the kind of persecution that we've seen in Kashmir, the inhumane treatment that we've seen, the reaction of the world was sadly missing. And because of that, that gave them that kind of free rein to continue that, and that has now spilled over into India itself. And that is why now we are seeing India itself under the threat of, perhaps, do you think it can result in breakage within India also? Because when we see this kind of movement picking up, it's a lot. When we talk about minorities, yes, Muslims are a minority, but it's a huge minority, right?
That's right. It's a huge minority, about 14.6%. Right, about according to their 2011 census, 172 million Muslims. So if you really push them against the wall, any population for that matter, any entity for that matter, any community for that matter, obviously they will retaliate. They will just go for anything. Now, your question about the testing ground of Kashmir, yes, Indians, they feel perhaps that they have tested it quite well. No one said anything. In fact, there is a commission report, Human Rights Commission report, over 100 pages. And the commissioner, while presenting that report, was having tears in his eyes, and the entire world had seen it. Right? That is a UN entity. So nothing happens even with that, and their recommendation is still just shelved. Recommendation like giving access to the Human Rights Commission subcommittee to go to Kashmir, and there are so many other recommendations. None of them have been accepted by the Indian government. One. Second, the Religious Freedom Commission of the United States, they have very clearly indicated the way the Indian government is tolerating widespread harassment and violence against religious minorities. These are minorities. These are the words they've used.
Right. Right, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. We spoke about Indian minorities, the treatment that India is meting out to minorities, the kind of premeditated torture, the kind of premeditated victimization as far as Indian minorities are concerned. And certainly we hope and wish that the world would react to this. As far as image of secular India is concerned, certainly that has suffered a dent, and let's hope that there will be the kind of reaction that one wants to see to this kind of premeditated persecution. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.